Roxana's second life began with her father kidnapping a boy. "Father, who is he?" she asked. "A cheeky blue bastard who needs training," he replied. Roxana knew him instantly. Cassis Pedelian, the female lead's brother, a death flag wrapped in ropes and fury. This is completely fucked up. She hadn't always known this world was a novel. In her first life, she died in a winter accident, only to be reborn as the daughter of a breathtakingly beautiful mother and a terrifyingly indifferent father. "You have to grow up and become a great Agriche," her mother had said, cradling her. Agriche. The name stirred something in her, but sleep claimed her before she could think further. She had no idea just how doomed she truly was. The caged flower of Agriche. Roxana Agriche never asked to be born into a family of murderers, but fate had placed her in the heart of darkness, among criminals, assassins, and manipulators. Her father, Lante Agriche, cared little for his children beyond their usefulness. Those who failed to meet his expectations disappeared. At 8 years old, Roxana's path was decided for her, not as a warrior, but as a seductress, a tool to extract secrets and assassinate targets. It disgusted her. Yet under her mother's pleading gaze, she had no choice but to obey. Only Achille, her golden-haired older brother, made life bearable. He was her warmth, her solace. "Roxy, I'll protect you," he always said with a foolish grin. But Achille was too kind for Agriche. At 15, deemed unworthy, he was disposed of. His lifeless body was returned to their mother, and Roxana fell into despair. She was next. She knew it. With cold determination, Roxana changed. She trained harder, honed her skills, and silenced her protests. When her mother whispered, "You must become part of the family," Roxana only nodded. She became what they wanted. Years passed. More siblings vanished. Then, at 12, for the first time, Lante summoned Roxana to dine with him. Sitting before her monstrous father, realization struck like lightning. She had read this before. The twisted rules, the ruthless father, the tragic fate. This was the world of a novel. And in this story, the Agriche family was destined for ruin. Roxana clenched her fists beneath the table. If this was a book, she would rewrite her ending, even if it meant destroying the Agriche name herself. Roxana Agriche stood at the entrance of the dungeon, the damp air curling around her like ghostly fingers. "Would you please lend me the key for a minute?" she asked sweetly, tilting her head. The guard hesitated. "The master told me not to let anyone inside." Roxana sighed, her red eyes locking onto his. Should I charm him? Or threaten him? She didn't need to do either. The man flushed, fumbling with the key. He was clearly unprepared for her presence. Pathetic, she thought, slipping the key from his grasp. "I only take a quick look," she murmured, her lips curving into a gentle smile. That was enough. The guard stepped aside and Roxana descended into the shadows. The stench of blood and damp rot filled her nose as she navigated the corridors. At last, she found him. The silver-haired boy slumped against the cold stone wall, his wrists and ankles torn from restraints. Cassis Pedelian, the eldest son of the Pedelian family. Her father had ordered his confinement, waiting for him to break. Roxana knelt beside him, brushing his sweat-dampened hair from his face. He was striking, even in his weakened state golden eyes now closed, lips slightly parted. He looked almost peaceful. But if he woke up in this place, peace would be the last thing he felt. Roxana pulled a small vial from her sleeve, pried his mouth open, and slipped the medicine inside. His brows furrowed, a low groan escaping his throat. His lashes fluttered, and then golden eyes met red. "Don't spit it out. It's an antidote. If wanted to kill you, I wouldn't use poison," she pointed out. But he wasn't listening, struggling with surprising strength. Roxana sighed. "He's making this difficult." "Sorry," she muttered, then struck the side of his neck. Cassis gasped, the force forcing him to swallow the pill before his body sagged. His head lolled, unconscious once more. Roxana flexed her fingers. Maybe that was a little too hard. She glanced at his sleeping face, then rose to her feet. "Well, it's already done." Without another word, she turned and walked out of the dungeon, leaving the silver-haired prisoner behind in the dark. Roxana returns to the dungeon the next day without trouble. The guard, Johann, easily lets her in, flustered by her attention. Inside, she finds Cassis Pedelian awake and alert. He questions what she gave him the day before, and she confirms it was an antidote for poison. Skeptical, Cassis demands her identity, assuming she's part of the Agriche family that kidnapped him. Roxana, ignoring his hostility, tests his vision and realizes he's temporarily blind due to magic, not poison. She assures him his sight will return in 2 days, but warns against trying to fix it. Before leaving, she unexpectedly tells him she doesn't want him to die, shocking him. Cassis tries to stop her, but she exits without hesitation. Roxana sat at the edge of her bed, staring at the moonlight seeping through the tall windows. Her mind was a storm of unwelcome thoughts, twisting and turning with the knowledge she now possessed. She had read Flower of Hell in her past life, every gruesome, twisted detail. And now she was inside it. Worse, she was a villain doomed to perish with her wretched family. The knock on her door barely registered in her thoughts. "Miss Roxana, this is Emily." "Come in." Emily, her ever-composed maid, entered the room, carrying a tray with a glass of water and a neatly folded piece of parchment. "We have entered the 5th stage of Natarium tolerance and have increased our dose by 0.2 per on from today, at the level of 4.7 per on, which is a lethal dose." Roxana barely listened as she poured the white powder into her water, watching it dissolve with eerie calm. This was a ritual for every Agriche child, training their bodies to resist poison. But she wasn't doing this to survive her family's brutal lessons. She was preparing for something else. "Roxy's sister, Jeremy." The dark-haired boy pushed past Emily, storming into the room with all the reckless energy of a spoiled child. His blue eyes, usually so mischievous, gleamed with something unsettling tonight. Roxana met his gaze calmly, suppressing a sigh. "Jeremy," she greeted. "I saw you talking to him again," Jeremy spat, his lips curling. "Why do you keep going to the dungeon? You're not supposed to care about prisoners." "Ah, so that was it." Roxana tilted her head. "Are you jealous?" Jeremy's jaw clenched. "No, he's Pedelian trash. You know that, right?" Roxana's lips curled into a slow smile. "And yet you seem very concerned." Jeremy stepped closer, eyes darkening. "I just don't want you to get attached. You're mine, Roxy." Something cold twisted in Roxana's stomach. Jeremy was dangerous. She had known this long before she entered this world, but now, standing before him, feeling the possessiveness in his gaze, she understood just how deep his madness ran. He wasn't just Agriche. He was one of the reasons this family would fall. She had to be careful. Forcing a soft chuckle, Roxana reached up, patting Jeremy's head like one would a child. "Don't be silly," she murmured. "No one in this house belongs to anyone." Jeremy's eyes searched hers as if trying to find a lie. Finally, he sighed dramatically, leaning into her touch like a pampered cat. "I don't like it," he muttered. "You should just stay with me." Roxana smiled. "We'll see." As Jeremy left, she exhaled slowly, the momentary act of affection vanishing from her face like a mask slipping away. Jeremy Agriche was a threat. And soon she would have to deal with him too. Cassis flinched as something soft and round pressed against his lips. A familiar scent of herbs lingered in the air, and he immediately recognized it. The survival pill. It was a concentrated dose of nutrients, enough to sustain a person for 3 days without food. He had taken these before heading to the border. Perhaps the girl had seen the untouched bowl on the floor of his prison. Agriche gave him food once a day, but it was nothing more than foul-smelling filth. Even if it had been high quality, he wouldn't have eaten anything from them. "What makes you think I'd trust you?" Cassis murmured coldly. The girl was silent for a moment, then sighed. "Well, I can't help it then." Before he could react, her fist drove into his abdomen. A sharp pain shot through him, forcing his mouth open. Something slid past his lips. Too late. Cassis groaned, doubling over. The pain was all too familiar. It was just like when he first met her. but this time he didn't black out. The girl blinked, looking almost embarrassed. You should be more careful, she continued. No one else here will approach you with good intentions, except for me. Cassis scoffed. What kind of good intentions involve punching someone unconscious? The girl didn't flinch. You'll understand eventually. Her touch was surprisingly gentle as she checked his wounds. It was such a stark contrast to how ruthlessly she attacked his vital points. He frowned, unable to figure her out. Tell me what else you fed me. The taste of medicine is still in my mouth. Painkillers and antibiotics, she replied simply. Your wounds are deep. Don't touch them. Cassis hesitated, then asked, Do you think I can survive and leave here? Silence. Agriche had no reason to keep him alive. His kidnapping was a declaration of war. Even if he escaped, the conflict between Pedelian and Agriche would escalate beyond return. Cassis sighed. You don't have to say it. I already know. Another silence stretched between them. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she spoke. You're not going to die because I... She stopped. Whatever she had been about to say, she swallowed it back. Eat this. Cassis hesitated, then took the medicine from her hand and swallowed it without protest. It melted instantly on his tongue. Unlike before, she didn't leave immediately. Instead, she lingered in front of him. Is it because of the noise outside? Relying on his heightened senses, he asked, Tell me your name. She had avoided every question about her identity before, but this time, he only asked for her name. Silence. Just as he was about to give up, a whisper brushed against his ear. Roxana. Cassis stilled. Roxana. A name like the dawn that comes when the night is over.